guys, and today a number of huge explosions destroyed a lot of legitimate military sites all over the Russian Federation. And let's begin with the most interesting one. That was a military commandant's office near St. Petersburg that literally collapsed after the explosion, neutralizing at least 3 people involved in the preparation and training of the Russian volunteers for the war in Ukraine. We don't know who was responsible for this explosion. Was it the Ukrainian special military operation, or maybe someone smoked again? But anyway, such cases act extremely demotivating for the potential future war criminals. Conscription numbers are constantly falling in Russia, and now I believe will fall even more. Another legitimate target neutralized is a chemical plant in Perm region, and the Ukrainian drones were actively working with the oil refinery Ilsky near Kazan, Tatarstan, quite far away from the Ukrainian border and super important for the collapsing Russian oil industry. So let's discuss all of these important events on our way to implement the only working peace plan, that is to defeat and demilitarize Russia. And buckle up, because I turn on full sarcastic Anna regime. How else can we discuss this preventive destruction of the Russian volunteers while still on the Russian side? My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see Putin in The Hague, subscribe and share these videos to spread the good news. And the good news is that with each day, Russia becomes weaker and poorer. And more of its economic and military problems and even defense and security problems are exposed by Ukrainian drones, by Russian negligence, and by protests that keep occurring in very different parts of this enormously large federation. So let's begin with the Leningrad commandant's office. It is a funny story, the name of the region, Leningrad, in Russia, more than 30 years after the collapse of the USSR, when most of its former republics condemned the crimes of the communist regime that, trust me, was responsible for many. In Russia, they keep glorifying these bloody communist leaders like Lenin. He is literally still in the center of Moscow near Putin, and the region is named after him around St. Petersburg. Another Russian hypocrisy, because St. Petersburg is the city of the Russian Tsars, killed by Lenin and now surrounded by Lenin region. But let's return back to the explosion. It was pretty serious. Photos available online can prove it. 2 floors were destroyed and at least 3 people neutralized. According to the channels like Astra, which collect information directly from the places, and serious rebellious groups deep inside the Russian area, this commandant's office was involved in the training of the Russian volunteers for the front lines in Ukraine or the front lines in Russia, because yes, there are now a lot of front lines on the Russian territory. And Leningrad, actually Leningrad region right now. So such explosions, they first of all destroy these military sites for training. Second, they demilitarize people involved in such training of future war criminals of the Russian army. And also they act extremely demotivating for the potential volunteers. And that's actually good, because it saves their lives. But are you ready for this super sarcastic Anna regime? Actually, maybe it was a part of training. You know that Russian soldiers do not live long on the Ukrainian territory, and they quickly disappear, mildly speaking. So maybe that's exactly what they're training to do in that training center. They were training to... Anyway, it's important because this happens also deep inside the Russian area. This acts as a demotivation for future volunteers, and who knows what happens next. Because trust me, every Russian soldier has a good chance to save the life by returning back home to Russia, where they've got a lot of problems that they should focus on. including the collapsing economy. And the Ukrainian drone sanctions are very responsible for this decline of the Russian war budget. Thumbs up for that, and that is perhaps the most effective strategy to stop this war sooner. So I'm happy that we returned back to this prevention. And Ukrainian drones targeted one of the biggest Russian oil refineries in the region, Ilsky. Lots of explosions, lots of destruction, and you know that in 2025, revenues of Russian oil and gas companies fell 50%. That's huge. And companies like Lukoil, Rosneft, Gazprom, which were symbols of Russian wealth, are now begging Kremlin for money, forgetting that they were actually the companies that brought money to the Russian budget. And now the situation is getting worse with each day, with each visit of the Ukrainian drones. And another legitimate military target was neutralized in Perm. That was a chemical plant, Metafrax, and you know such locations are involved in the production of explosives, and perhaps the only sphere of economy that keeps afloat in Russia is this military industry, but even it demonstrates decline because they overestimated their potential and underestimated the strength of Ukraine and Ukrainians. They continue targeting our infrastructure, energy, heating during these super frosty days. That is definitely very wrong and goes against any rules of war, but they are using 2026 production year missiles. So they've run out of their Soviet stockpiles, which was the basis. They don't have money to buy North Korean, and they are using the leftovers, which means that taking into account this exposed Russia's vulnerability, their huge, grave economic problems, and Putin's disconnection with reality, because I believe he knows nothing about the real situation on the front lines, the real Russian losses, the real state of the Russian economy. People fear him. Who will tell him the truth? Reality. Reality will show him the truth when his regime collapses, and we need to witness that together. So subscribe, join the community on this channel, and also Anna Danilchuk, where we discussed another very hot topic inside the Russian Federation that you will rarely come across on the foreign channels. They are talking about protests in very different Russian regions, naming Altai, Sakha, Bashkortostan, Tatarstan among the most rebellious one. And you need to know it, so when the Russian Federation in its modern state collapses, you won't be surprised. Thank you for your kind advice and comments. I read all of them. Follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord, and Substack. And thank you so much for buying me coffees, becoming patrons and sponsors of the channels. And check the merch shop. Lots of good products that speak about Ukraine, remind about Ukraine, and help us demonstrate our unity. Thank you for your friendship, for your continued support. United we stand. Slava Ukraini!